Welcome to the first video of this series, the story of glucose from its synthesis to its breakdown. Let's begin this journey, the journey of glucose, with our first chapter that I named as Let's Make Some Sugar. So come with me, let's make some sugar. This is the beginning. As we know and already talked about, कि इस वीडियो सीरीज में हम नेचर के दो मोस्ट फैसिनेटिंग प्रोसेसेस फोटोसिंथेसिस और सेलुलर रेस्पिरेशन इन दोनों के बारे में बात करने वाले हैं. लेकिन रिगार्डिंग दिस वीडियो वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट द फर्स्ट प्रोसेस, द फोटोसिंथेसिस. सो द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन दैट अराइज इन माय माइंड इज दैट हु डज फोटोसिंथेसिस. हमें लगता है शायद प्लांट्स, राइट? नो, ऑब्वियसली देयर आर प्लांट्स हु डज द फोटोसिंथेसिस, बट देयर आर अदर ग्रुप्स ऑफ ऑर्गेनिजम्स टू. And you will be amazed to know that there are bacteria that did and also do photosynthesis today. Here is an example of an influential marine cyanobacterium that produces much of the world's oxygen even today. The name of that bacterium is Prochlorococcus. It's not only bacteria, also algae is involved in the photosynthetic processes. Here is a picture of a freshwater Spirogyra with a ribbon-shaped chloroplast. And finally, and obviously, the plants that perform the photosynthesis. Now, in this video, as we are talking about the plants, so we will study the photosynthetic processes and its details in case of plants. So, let's begin. Now, photosynthesis in higher plants, अगर मैं इस term को define करूं, photo means light, synthesis means to form something. So photosynthesis is a synthesis of glucose in the presence of two things. First, the sunlight, and second, the pigments, or more accurately, I should say, photosynthetic pigments. Now these photosynthetic pigments, there are three types of these pigments: chlorophylls, carotenoids, and phycobilins. Photosynthesis के बारे में बात करने के लिए you have to know about these pigments, the photosynthetic pigments. I have already made a video, so this will be a good idea for you to go to that video by clicking on this I button and come back again. Okay, let's move forward. Let me ask you a question. Where do you think plants come from? You will say obviously they come from soil. But what if I say a plant comes from the air? Don't believe me? You will come to believe me after what I am going to tell you. By the point where we are now, in this video, we know what is photosynthesis. This is the synthesis of food by a plant in the presence of light. What do you think the plant is in terms of chemistry? A plant is mostly the carbon, and that carbon is also the food of that plant. So, the plant uses the process or the reaction of photosynthesis to make its food, or I should say, to make itself. Plant takes some reactants, water, light, and carbon dioxide. Water, we all know, water comes from the soil. Yes? Light, this is the fuel that runs the photosynthetic machinery. It comes from the air. And the third thing, carbon dioxide. Without the carbon, the plant cannot make its food, that is glucose. So, the plant came from the air. This is at least my opinion. Now, in this process, we have some reactants, we got some products. Reactants involves water, light, and carbon dioxide that gives the food of the plant, glucose, water, and as a byproduct, they expel out oxygen. This is a byproduct for a plant, but for a consumer like us, this is life. We have talked about photosynthesis, which is the process of making food. There must be a place where this happens. And we, from our early science classes, know that inside a plant, this occurs in the leaves. And by knowing that what are the ingredients used for photosynthesis, I can reason that leaves are the best option because they are the most exposed part of the plant and they contain pigments. But may I ask, where inside the leaves? Here is a leaf under the microscope. As you can see in this picture, you can see the veins clearly and some of the crystals like frisbee balls present inside the leaf. What are these? Obviously, these are the cells of the plants. As you can see in this video, that these are the cells of the plants and they have something mysterious disc-shaped things streaming inside these cells. What are these? These are the things where in a plant actual photosynthesis occurs. The chloroplast. This is an organelle that is present inside the photosynthetic organisms in order to perform the photosynthetic processes. As you can see in this illustration that I have adapted, I've already talked about from J. Hostler's science comic, where you can see a chloroplast cut into two halves. One half of the chloroplast is present here with some of the things stacked inside it. This stack of whatever these things are is called a granum. And if you look closely, you can find a name for these things in this stack. This is the thylakoid. In the stroma, there are thylakoids stacked in the granum or grana and interconnected via frets. This is another illustration that I have borrowed from J. Hostler's blog. Here, I must introduce, as a courtesy, the characters. There are two of them. You can see Wilbur and Aunt Edna. The Aunt Edna, the black ant, and Wilbur, the hoverfly, I think. Yes. Now, what you can see in this picture, that this hoverfly, which is Wilbur, is cutting the thylakoid into two halves. And we got one half of this thylakoid, which has three parts. The stroma, which is outside the thylakoidal membrane, and inside the thylakoidal membrane, there is the lumen. So this is what a thylakoid looks like when we cut that into two halves. We took a chloroplast, cut into two halves, and see the content inside it. A chloroplast is an aggregation of thylakoids in the form of granum connected with each other with a transverse bridge called the frets. If we cut one of the thylakoid into two halves, we can see the thylakoidal membrane, which separates the lumen of the thylakoid from the stroma of the chloroplast. This is simple. The chloroplast contains thylakoid. The thylakoid contains a thylakoidal membrane and a lumen inside. And outside, whatever outside the thylakoid membrane is called the stroma. Now, the thylakoidal membrane is the most important part when we are going to study the first section of our video. The thylakoidal membrane contains quantasomes, which we will talk about in our later videos. Let us talk about the photosynthesis and its processing, how photosynthesis works. So photosynthesis is composed of two separate sets of chemical reactions. The first is known as the light-dependent reaction and the second is known as light-independent reaction. This was the first part of this trilogy. Here we talked about photosynthesis, what is photosynthesis, where it occurs, and some details about chloroplast. In our next video, we will talk about the first component of the photosynthetic reactions, the light-dependent reactions. Until then, please subscribe my channel and hit that bell icon so you can get the notification for the next video. That is all. Thanks for watching.